Hey guys, so finally getting around to the first of my Sentai reviews. So I'm going to be starting these in order in which I've seen them. Well, I worded that wrong. Mostly in chronological order that the season has been released for the ones that I've seen. So I will be starting with Sentai Group number 15, Choujin Sentai Jetman or Wing Squadron Jetman. It aired in 1990, from 91 to 92. It's a rather old Sentai season. It was the first season not implemented into Power Rangers. It was the last season that implemented into Power Rangers into some form or fashion. We never got. This is the last season that we've never gotten anything for that season over here in America for Power Rangers. So, for those of you who grew up on Power Rangers like I have and have no idea what Sentai is, then you have no idea who these guys are, what they look like, or anything. But seeing how I just got into Sentai back in mid-July, I think it was, the first Sentai group that a friend of mine who's big into Sentai and Kamen Rider told me to watch Jetman, like, right out of the gate. And I was like, why? Well, it's because it's freaking amazing. It's like the best ever. And I go around to look at what other people say, and a lot of people, it's almost unanimous that Jetman is considered by many to be the best Sentai season ever. And after finishing it up about a month ago or so, I can completely see why. It has a lot of elements that you wouldn't expect to find in a kids show, even for Japanese standards, because I think you all know the Japanese are a lot more loose with their censorship and everything like that than we are, and this would probably be along the lines of Smallville in terms of American standards, which would be like a mid-late teen, early adult drama. And this is supposed to be a kid's show in Japan, although I think it's better than Smallville. I wasn't necessarily fond of that show anyway, but that's something I'll probably never ever talk about on this channel. So, the 5 Sentai members in this group, Ryu, who is the Red Hawk, the leader of the group, Kareen, the White Swan, Radita, I've never figured out how to pronounce his name, the Yellow Owl, Akko, the Blue Swan, and Guy, the Black Condor. For those of you that don't know, the season is loosely based off of Gatchaman, or G-Force, or Battle of the Planets, whatever you recognize that show as. Ken the Eagle, Joe the Condor, June the Swan. I think anybody who's even familiar with anime knows what show I'm talking about. It's loosely based off of that show, although I've never seen Gatchaman. I'm going to watch it sooner or later because I heard it's really good. But a friend of mine who has seen it said that there's a lot of comparisons. Like, Red Falcon is Ken the Eagle, and Black Condor is Joe the Condor, obviously. And then White Swan and June are basically yada yada yada. So, if you've seen Gatchaman and you haven't seen Sentai yet, then I'll say go ahead. I don't know. I haven't seen Gatchaman yet, so I can't make any direct comparisons. But if this was based off of Gatchaman, I'm gonna have to go back and watch it. So, there was a manga for the season where they had a 6th member called Green Eagle, but I don't know if I'll be able to find that anywhere. So, the enemy group in the season is called the Vyram. They're an interdimensional conquering unit or something where they conquer other dimensions. And they had conquered a few other dimensions beforehand, and we'll figure that out as the season went along. And this is the next dimension that they're trying to conquer. And apparently there was this military group that knew about them. So yeah, I guess I'm going to go ahead and lead into the story then. And they created this weird thing called Birdemic rays. They don't necessarily explain what it is or how they got it or if they made it or whatever. That was never explained, and if it was, it completely went over my head. But they invite 5 people that they think are capable of taking these rays, thus giving them, strength and abilities and all this stuff, to become the Jetman to fight off the virus and protect our dimension. 2 of which are Ryu and what was her name again? Crap. It was yeah. Oh yeah, Rai or whatever her name was. It's basically Ryu's fiance. They were 2 of the ones chosen. I'm assuming she was supposed to become the White Swan or something. We never find out which one she was supposed to be. But the Vyram attacked the base and practically destroy it. When Ryu, Rai, whatever the heck, and the commander try to get out, a hole in the space station sucks Ryu out. So she's presumably dead at this point, which strikes Ryu as depressing because this was his fiancée and he just saw her fly into the depths of space, and that would kind of upset you. So Ryu had taken the Birdemic rays already, so he's powered up. So when the base explodes, those 2 get out, and the ray gun sends like 4 other ray beams raining down on Earth, and it lands on 4 other people spread throughout Japan. One being Radata, who is a farmer, basically. He's just a big fat farmer dude. That's all he is. Ako, who is a high school teenage girl. Kareen, who is a very, very rich, fancy business lady. And then Guy, who is a bar roughhouser. So when they land, they use this. I got curls in my hair. They use this tracker to try to hunt down the other members using a thing that scans Birdemic rays or whatever. They find Radata and Ako. Those 2 go in. Kareen's not so sure because it's kind of out of her league. And then Ryu finds Guy, and I think you know where this is going. You've got Guy, who is the Boy Scout, basically. He's the good guy, goody two-shoes, always does things the right way, kind of like Captain America. And then you've got Guy over here who's just, I don't like you, so I'm going to punch you in the face because I don't like you. So these 2 are almost exact opposites of one another. Ryu would put himself on the line to save somebody else, and Guy wouldn't give a crap about anybody else. And that's basically how they are. Almost exact opposites. So they don't get along. They fight a lot for most of the season. Like, they do more fighting against each other than they do fighting other people. It seems like they'll be fighting Vyram soldiers, and then they'll just get into an argument with each other during the fight. So, yeah. So, who are the Vyram, I said? Well, there are the evil group. You have the Count Radicate, who's, to an extent, I consider him the main villain of the series, although there isn't really a leader. And you have Tran, who is basically like a little kid. Radicate is supposed to be like a vampire thing. Go with it. Gray, who is a very, very fancy as can be robot. He's gentleman as crap. I'm not even joking. He'll sit there and he will drink wine. He's a freaking robot, but he put his pinky out and everything. He is gentleman as can be for a villain. And you have Maria, who, if you paid attention to the first episode enough, it'll strike you a bit odd, and there's a reason for that later. And they use these insect things to transform like technological or electronic devices into monsters and everything. So they're called the biodimensional beasts, and those are the creatures they use. So they managed to get the whole group together, barring Guy being a complete douchebag, and then he runs off after the first battle. And, a very unstable unit at first, because you got 5 people all from different, worlds and society, and they're a very unstable group at the beginning. They're a very unstable group for most of the season. So, after a while, Kareen, or White Swan, I'm just gonna go with that for now, ends up starting to like Ryu. But he isn't going to snitch because he's still dedicated to his supposedly dead fiancée. So he's not going to budge. But Guy is starting to like Kareen. So now we're getting in a weird love triangle. And at the same time, Guy thinks that Ryu liked Kareen but just won't admit it. So he's jealous of Ryu, although there's nothing really for him to be jealous about, I guess. So now Guy hates Ryu even more. It's fuel to the fire. So there's this point here where Maria does this thing where she implants like these crystal things into people, and it ends up making crystals like come out of their skin and everything. That was a very, very disturbing episode. And when a certain point comes, they turn into a crystal that's basically dying, and Guy gets hit with this ray that does this to him. So Kareen starts to feel really, really sorry for him, and I think she begins to kind of fall towards him a little bit, but not completely. She's still liking Ryu some. So they end up destroying the monster. He gets restored. We thought Guy was going to die mid-season, but he really doesn't. He ends up coming out of it anyway. So time passes. There's more character development going on with Ryu and Guy still fighting. Guy trying to confess his love to Kareen. Kareen trying to confess her love to Ryu, and nothing's really going on until we get to this thing where a interdimensional queen basically shows up. Now, excuse me if I get some of the story elements and stuff out of order, because I've only seen this season once. So I'm kind of, it takes me a while to remember things. I remember things badly if I've only seen it once. So she has a creature that she's trying to feel off to life. This is basically the Vyram Empress or something. And none of the 4 commanders that we know of up to this date like her very much. So while they are fighting the Jetman, they're also trying to get rid of her. And so I missed something on the Vyram. They put up a plan that whoever's plan destroys the Jetman, that person takes over the throne of the Vyram. So as a group, they're going against the Jetman, but at the same time, they're having a little competition within themselves. So this does kind of fuel for some weird, because the Jetman have internal struggles and drama and stuff, but so do the Vyram. That's an interesting little twist that you don't normally see put into shows like this, where you have similar internal issues going on both sides. So it makes watching the villains actually kind of interesting. So her little bug creature thing basically feels off of human agony or something. So Radicate eventually ends up killing her after she had turned him into a human for a little bit, and he managed to regain his form as Radicate, and he kills her. So now he takes this little creature bug thing that she's trying to raise and uses it for himself. He then managed to get it to hatch, and they're not able to really kill this thing. Now, I hope I'm getting my facts straight here. Okay, I'm just going to go with it. So they do end up killing this thing somehow. I don't remember exactly. See, some of the facts are floating over my head a little bit. So later, we are introduced to 3 people from another dimension, one of the dimensions that the Vyram destroyed. They bring their own robot with them. So up to this point, the Jetman only have one mecha, and it's called the Jet Icarus. It's just a basic robot, nothing big. It just has a sword and an axe. That's it. The actual mini machines are just little jets. That's it. It's nothing really fancy. That's one thing that Jetman didn't really handle well, is the mechas are pretty boring. So they bring with their own thing, this thing called the Jet Garuda. It's basically got a bird head, and it's got like bird talons for hands and stuff. So they're using this thing. The Jet Icarus is kind of injured, and the three people who brought this up from the other dimension get killed by Eradicate. So the Jetman take it, and they combined it with Jet Icarus to form Great Icarus, which is their final mech, basically. They get it like halfway through the season. They just put them together. Nothing big, right? It's kind of lame, to be honest. And there's your final mech already. So the team does disband a few times. I'm trying to remember what's next in the story. Crap. What was next? I'm seriously trying to remember. There was, okay. So about 3/4 through the season, Ryu has shaken Kareen off way too many times, and Guy has basically thrown his heart out on the table for her, and she eventually cracks after seeing that Maria, who is one of the Vyram commanders, is in fact Ryu's supposedly dead fiance that the Vyram took and brainwashed her, because Ryu managed to snap her out of it once. So everybody knows who that is. So from here on out, Ryu's gonna have a hard time fighting her because this is his fiance. So those two, so Kareen and Guy, are basically kind of now a thing. And to an extent it works, and then to an extent it doesn't, because she's on like the high level society. She's a rich girl. She's, her family owns businesses, and on the other hand, he doesn't really have a home. He drives a motorcycle, goes to bars, flirts with girls all the time, gets into fights. They're two different levels of the spectrum, and Guy has a really hard time fitting in and dealing with it. Although he loves her, it doesn't really work out all that well, and you'll kind of, and it shows. So we hit the near the end of the season. Tran, who the little kid is kind of being picked on most of the season because he's considered a kid and they can't really say he can do anything. So after his last plan to turn everybody into roaches to eat everything backfires, he uses his magic to its fullest extent to age himself to where he becomes Emperor Tranza. And he completely says screw their agreement of whoever beats the Jetman takes over. He just walks in there and just like throws those three around like they're nothing, and it's like, okay, my throne. Screw you people. Like he just tells them to just, screw you people. I'm taking over. So with his willpower, he just tosses them around. He creates his own robot, and while all this is going on, Radicay and Gray and what's her face? I forgot her name. Are all trying to overthrow this guy. Like they're tossing their agreement aside to team up to go against him, knock him off his high porch. At the same time, the Jetman can't do anything to stop him either. So after his big robot gets destroyed after a lot of battles where Great Icarus gets put on maintenance because it keeps getting almost destroyed every time it fights it, they managed to finally knock him down, and then Radicay manages to kill him. Well, not necessarily kill him, but he took his powers away and scarred him to where he was put into a mental hospital. So he's basically brain dead. So now there are only 3 members of the Vyram left. So Ryu finally managed to snap Maria back to Rei, with Radake fighting to try to keep her brainwashed. So she's sitting there back to her old self, and Ryu's like, "Come on, let's take you home and we can go back to the way things were." And she's like, "No, I can't. I'm a Vyram commander. This is my job." So apparently she's embraced it. She's not really brainwashed anymore. She's embraced the Vyram role, which I'm actually really surprised happened. I was not expecting her to stay on that course. But at the same time, she slashes and cuts Radake's face. And thus Radake ends up killing her. This sets Ryu off. Gray takes her body because Gray and her built a friendly relationship. I had to think Gray kind of fell for her a little bit himself, which is awkward because robot. But he takes her body to the beach, and then she dies on the beach, and this kills Ryu. Like, I'm not even joking. He just breaks down for like the next few episodes or so. Not even that. I think there's some few instances before that. And then afterward, he's just like swinging on a swing set, and he looks over and he sees Rei in the other swing, and then a Korean guy walk him. He's like, "Have you met my fiance?" Dude's going hallucinating all of a sudden. He's lost his mind, and this is so out of character because he's been the strong, tough, almighty leader that can't do anything wrong, and now here he is going psycho, and it's weird. It's really weird. And this was all after Radake used her as his own weapon, turning her into like a vampire thing, and then Ryu managed to got turned into a vampire also, and then that's what led into the whole Maria getting changed back and her dying and everything. So now Ryu is ticked at Radake for killing her. So now all of a sudden he's saying, "Screw you guys, I'm going after Radake myself." Now all of a sudden he's turned into the loner and telling the rest of the team to screw off. And at this point, Guy and Ryu have almost become pretty good friends. So now Guy is concerned and trying to stop him. So to an extent, he kind of leads them. And this is one reason why Guy is my favorite member of the Jetman. And I'll get to that when I talk about the characters here in a little bit. So he goes after Radake. And he tells Radata and Akko to go after him, while Kareen and Guy go after Gray. And he told Kareen to leave, so it's basically Black Condor versus Gray and Red Hawk versus Radake for a one-on-one showdown. The Black Condor versus Gray fight was a really good fight scene. He managed to kill Gray after half of his helmet got blown off. It was crazy to see like Guy's eye through the visor hole that was just blown off the helmet, and he ended up using his own machine gun against him. For the Red Hawk Radake fight, it came down. Red Hawk he like upgraded a bunch of his weapons to try to kill him in one shot, and none of them worked. And then they all came together after they snapped Ryu and to join the team, and they used this weird attack where they flew and became like a big phoenix and just flew through him and blew him up. But he ended up turning into this giant monster that I thought was Radake but earlier, because it was a big blue monster with claws. And this thing, I thought, I was like, is that Radake when he's a big monster thing? And then, yeah, it ended up turning into being Radake. So now you've got Great Icarus and Tetra Boy, which is another third robot that they made all by itself. I think Spazzy's crap. Like, to show how spazzy it is, they speed up the footage to show him running at normal speed, but everything else moving fast. Like he's a hyper robot. He always looks like this. Like he's nuts. It wasn't really that big of a deal. I mean, it only showed up like really near the end of the season, and they didn't really use him much, and he wasn't really useful. He was just like an assistant to like hold the guy down so Great Icarus can get a cheap shot at him. So they go after him. I think Tetra Boy kind of almost gets killed, and the commanders in Great Icarus with him. They end up fighting Raticate. He tells the others to get out, and Ryu does, and he ends up full forcing Great Icarus into destroying Raticate, and he manages to do so. So they depart a little bit, and then we see a few years later that Karin's getting married. It takes us a few minutes to see who it is, and he ends up being Ryu, which I was actually kind of disappointed in because I wanted to see a guy do it. So they show 4 of them and the commander there, but where's the guy? Well, he's going to get flowers, and then he ends up seeing a mugger rob a woman of her purse. He goes over, try to stop him, and he gets stabbed, which really, really sucked. So we see him get there after they got married, and he has a bouquet of flowers, and they see him sitting on a bench smoking like he always does. Him and Ryu are all cool, and they take up pictures and stuff, and then he gets up and goes party, and you see Guy just kind of plop over. And I saw that, I was like, Guy, no! We didn't find out, we didn't know until Gokaiger what really happened. The Gokaiger tribute episode for Jetman answered what happened to him. I'm not really going to spoil that, but I think it's kind of obvious what the answer is. Or if you've seen Gokaiger, you know what happened also. And it was sad. I mean, that ending, it was one of those endings that was so sad that it made you depressed for the next couple days. I was sad. So, very, very bad summary of the Jetman story. I'm sorry if I missed a lot of things or I put things out of place or I got facts wrong. I remembered the best I could. So, like I said, Ryu is, Captain America. He's the goody-goody two-shoes. He doesn't really develop much over the season. He just kind of stays stable, getting used to everybody else, and dealing with his fiancée being evil and then cracks at the end of the season was really out of character for him. But all in all, he was a good character. Guy, who is my favorite character, Black Condor, in the season, is because he started off as the douchebag that you hate. I mean, I hate characters like him who come up and he's just a pain in the tuchus and always gets into fights with people and is a complete dickweed. But as the season goes on, you see him gradually become more tolerant of everybody, to where he basically becomes the second in command of the Jetman, and him and Ryu become best friends. And it's pretty awesome to see how he develops from being a complete jerk to being almost on Ryu's level. And plus he had the best looking suit of all of them. Karin, who was the rich fancy girl White Swan, she had to get used to this kind of lifestyle because she's always been, the fancy life, the high life. And kind of going into the workforce, kind of something like that for her is a bit of an adjustment. She managed to get used to it, but her whole struggle with the Ryu Guy love triangle thing is where most of her story conflicts came from. In the end, she was doing whatever she took, and she gave Guy a chance, and it obviously didn't work out, so she managed to get what she wanted. She managed to marry Ryu, which was, I guess, nice to see. Rattata and Akko really didn't get much story character development time. Most of it was on those 3. But Rattata, he's like the nutball. He eats a lot, and he doesn't really fight like the others. Like Guy and Ryu, they combat, they fly, they use swords. There's a balanced tough guy fighters. Akko and Karin are like the girls. They flip, they slap. They just do things early. Rattata's like the muscle. He throws rocks at people. Like, he'll pick up a big rock twice the size of his head and just throws it and just goes and hits them with it. Everything. And he jumps on people, like, and starts hitting them on the head like this. He's weird. And he's funny to watch fight because he's kind of like a bit of a tubby dude. So it's always weird to see him fight. But he's a farmer, so he's kind of a soft-hearted guy. But he doesn't really develop much. He doesn't really have any star moment episodes. Same with Akko. She's just the high school teenage girl who's always partying and likes to keep the group together. She's always, like the inspirational, peppy one. And when things are looking bleak, she's the one who tries to put the energy back in the group. But just like Rattata, she doesn't have any like shining moments. It usually focuses on Kareen, Ryu, and Guy. So they're good characters. It's just they didn't get any spotlight time, and I found that a bit disappointing. For the Vyram, Ratake was basically the straightforward one. He didn't change any. He was just, the one who tried to assert himself as the leader. Gray, like I said, was gentleman as crap for a robot. I mean, he's my favorite villain because you would always see him there. Jetman. Drinking wine, playing the piano. Maria, who was Ryu's fiancée, after she found out, or when Ryu found out she was his fiancée, she started to have these struggles of dealing with this fact. Like, she couldn't understand what the heck was going on. And the fact that she actually stayed loyal to the Vyram after changing back was kind of stunning. And then Tran, after he grew up, he became like ridiculously overpowered, but for the most part he was annoying. So they do have their internal struggles, like Marie and Gray do end up becoming really close with one another, and that's why Gray held her as she passed. And whenever, I mean, how many times do you see a story where the villains have just as much internal struggle and growing as a unit as the heroes do? And I found that really awesome. The theme song is catchy. It's really catchy. It's simple. It's not special, but it's catchy at the same time. So, what do I think of Jetman overall? Well, it definitely lived up to its hype. It's a very, very, very emotionally driven storyline. I mean, if you're one of those people who loves drama, loves emotion, loves character development, loves, internal struggles, all this nonsense, this season just about has everything. I mean, everything that could ever possibly happen to a team, it happens to them. Their leader breaks down. They disband like 3 or 4 times. They have their base destroyed. They lose their powers. They get kidnapped. One of their members dies. They have love issues. They have a hard time dealing with one another. All the stuff. They have learning problems. Like Kareen had a hard time flying her jet vehicle at the beginning of the season. They had fear to overcome. They had the reality of being a team and being in this thing where their world's in their hand. Just about everything that a team could go through, they went through it. So this is a really strong team when you look at it compared to other units, especially in later Sentais where they get along really well for the most part. But this is a tough group of Sentai members. So it definitely lived up to its hype. Is it my favorite season per se? Not really. It's a very, very, very close second to my favorite season, and I'm going to talk about that season much later because it's kind of a newer season. But yeah, Jetman, definitely worth it. I wouldn't recommend it as an intro season because it's kind of hard to spoil yourself by watching the very best first, and then all the others might seem a bit disappointing. So I would save this one maybe for like your 3rd, 4th, or 5th season to watch. For me, it was my 4th. So yeah, I recommend this to everybody. Even if you're not a Sentai fan, I'd recommend you at least watch the season. Maybe it'll get you into other Sentais as well. So yeah. So next time, I will be jumping to the next season, the one that was adapted into the first season of Mighty Morphin Power Rangers, Choujin Sentai Zyuranger. So, for those of you who grew up with Mighty Morphin Power Rangers, well, here's how our childhood heroes really were meant to be.